Welcome to Nutrition Rounds with Dr. Danielle Belardo, the podcast for anyone interested in learning about plant-based nutrition through an evidence-based approach. Every week, we share insights and interviews with physicians who are leading experts in nutrition and health. Whether you've been plant-based for many years or are still searching for the perfect diet, Nutrition Rounds will inspire and empower you to live your healthiest life backed by science. Now here's your host, Dr. Danielle Belardo, MD.
Hello, and you are with Danielle Belardo, MD on Nutrition Rounds. So as you guys know, if you follow me on social media, I was at the American College of Cardiology National Conference this weekend, and it was incredible. I was there to present my research on pulmonary hypertension and right heart failure, and it was such an incredible experience and just a great weekend with brilliant cardiologists from across the nation sharing some really exciting new trial data and research in everything in electrophysiology, interventional cardiology, preventative cardiology, cardiac imaging. It was so exciting, and there was just so much great research and data that came out. And the most exciting was that I met so many cardiologists from everywhere, and I mean everywhere, that told me that they listened to this podcast and it's convinced them to go more plant-based and decrease their animal product consumption. And even better, it's encouraged them to share lifestyle modification more often with their patients. Literally, that made my heart so full, so happy. So first of all, hi, if you guys are listening to this episode, and thank you so much for your feedback. I'm so honored that this podcast is reaching each and every single one of you. But this weekend, I was especially honored to hear such kind words from cardiologists out there who I so look up to, who I follow on Twitter, and who are ginormous cardiologists in the space of interventional cardiology and cardiac imaging, and who I look up to so much. And I can't believe you listen to this podcast. So thank you. And I'm so honored that it's helped change your patient care. I mean, that's what this is about. I'm all about doing what we can to help our patients live their longest, healthiest, and best lives. And I'm so honored you're giving this a listen. So the fact that my little project here has impacted your patient care or your own life or your family's lives, even just the tiniest bit, it just makes me beyond happy. So thank you. Words can't describe how happy that makes me. And if you want to see what exciting scientific information came out at ACC this weekend, check my highlights on Instagram. I highlighted a lot of the really exciting trials and guidelines that were released. So thank you all so much for lending me your ears every episode, for giving this evidence-based nutrition information a chance and learning along with me. I really appreciate you guys giving this a chance week to week and us learning together. It's been so fun so far. Today's episode takes a bit of a different approach than usual. Usually we're discussing mostly the science and research that supports why plant-based nutrition is healthful. Well, how about the psychological aspects? How does fueling your body with plants help you live your life with purpose and meaning? And even more, how do we define resilience? How do we get up when we've been knocked down? How do we achieve happiness in life? And what is happiness? We answer these questions and more with the one and only Rich Roll. We discuss both alcohol and food addiction. We discuss how athletes can fuel their bodies with plants and how Rich can literally run for days on end. He does not have a protein deficiency, and how plant-based diet can be optimal for athletes of all levels. Rich is unbelievably, incredibly inspiring to me. A graduate of Stanford University and Cornell Law School, Rich is a 50-year-old accomplished vegan, ultra-endurance athlete and former entertainment attorney turned full-time wellness and plant-based nutrition advocate. He's a popular public speaker, husband, father of four, and inspiration to people worldwide as a transformative example of courageous and healthy living. In 2012, Rich became the #1 bestselling author with the publication of his inspirational memoir, Finding Ultra, Rejecting Middle Age, Becoming One of the World's Fittest Men, and Discovering Myself. Taking up where the book leaves off, in 2013, Rich launched the wildly popular Rich Roll podcast, which persistently sits atop the iTunes top 10 list. In 2014, Rich and his wife, Julie, published the best-selling cookbook and lifestyle primer, The Plantpower Way, whole food, plant-based recipes and guidance for the whole family. In May 2010, Rich and his ultra colleague Jason Lester accomplished an unprecedented feat of staggering endurance many said was not possible. Something they called the Epic 5 Challenge, an odyssey that entailed completing 5 Ironman distance triathlons on 5 islands of Hawaii in under a week. Commencing on Kauai, they traveled to Oahu, Molokai, and Maui before finishing on the Big Island, following the course of the Ironman World Championships on the Kona coast. In addition, Rich has been a top finisher in 2008 and 2009 Ironman World Championships in Hawaii. Considered to be one of the world's most daunting and grueling endurance races on the planet, Ultraman is a 3-day, 320-mile double Ironman distance triathlon that circumnavigates the entire Big Island. Limited to only 35 carefully selected invitation-only participants from all over the world. Day 1 involves a 6.2-mile ocean swim, immediately followed by a 90-mile cross-country cycling race. Day 2 is a 170-mile cycling race. And at the end of the event culminates on Day 3 with a 52-mile double marathon run on the searing hot lava fields of the Kona coast. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But what makes Rich truly remarkable is that less than 2 years prior to his first Ultraman, he didn't even own a bike, let alone race one. Although he competed as a butterfly swimmer at Stanford University in the late 80s, Rich's career was cut short by his struggles with drugs and alcohol, an addiction that led him astray for the next decade, alienating friends, colleagues, and family, landing him in jail, institution, and ultimately rehab at age 31. Although sober, Rich soon found himself 50 pounds overweight, the furthest thing from fit. Everything came to head on the eve of his 40th birthday. Defeated by a mere flight of stairs that left him buckled over in pain, he foresaw the almost certain heart attack looming in his near future. It was time for a major life change. The day immediately following his staircase epiphany, Rich overhauled his diet, became a dedicated vegan, put on his running shoes, and jumped back into the pool. It wasn't long before ambition took hold and his quest to participate in Ultraman slowly began. 2 years later, 50 pounds later, and fueled by nothing but plants, he surprised the triathlon and ultra communities by not only becoming the first vegan to complete the 320-mile Uber endurance event, but by finishing in the top 10 of males. He was the 3rd fastest American, with the 2nd fastest swim split. And despite having never previously completed even a half Ironman distance triathlon, he made this incredible accomplishment. It's just unbelievable. In 2009, Rich returned to Ultraman twice, the athlete he was the year prior. Despite a stacked field, he took home first day honors with blistering 2:21 swim victory, and that was 6th fastest of all time, and a 3rd fastest bike leg to win the day with 10-minute lead on the field. On day 2, Rich suffered a serious bike crash, but managed to salvage the day in 6th place overall with an injured knee and shoulder. He nonetheless went on to a 7:51 day 3 double marathon to hold 6th place overall. Rich's plant-fueled feats of boundary-pushing athleticism have been featured on CNN, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Stanford Magazine, Huffington Post, you name it. And he's also been named one of the 25 fittest men in the world. Along with his wife and 4 children, he lives in Malibu Canyon outside of Los Angeles. When he isn't writing, podcasting, or spending time with his family, you can find him lost on the remote trails of the Santa Monica Mountains. Hi, everyone. And today we're with Rich Roll, who, as you all know, I'm a gigantic fan, and I know that you're all fans as well. And Rich, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
My pleasure, Danielle. It's super nice to talk to you, and excited to talk about our favorite topics.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I already read your intro and I explained all of the things you've accomplished, and I just wanted to tell you one of my favorite things about your book actually is your book Finding Ultra is your foreword. I love your foreword so much. I think it is one of the most meaningful and brilliantly written pieces of literature and writing that exists. And I just wanted to read briefly for everyone this piece before we started because it's so beautiful. The American dream is an elegant, aspirational ideal originally premised on egalitarianism, equal opportunity for all, a mandated right to seek self-improvement, an open door to pursue potential and in turn contribute to the fruit of one's journey for the benefit of all. But along the way, the foundational ethos of this enchanting concept lies a smoldering carcass over the shoulder of a modern superhighway, supplanted by a relentless compulsion to accumulate and consume. The priority is no longer self-actualization, nor is it contribution. Personal responsibility has been exchanged for victimhood. Challenge is to be avoided. Comfort is king. And he who amasses the most wins. Indeed, personhood has been reduced to consumerism. Our social currency is stuff worth dictated, not by who we are, but by what we own, fueled by a cultural mandate that forsakes the value of service, struggle, and authentic expression for the pursuit of luxury, instant gratification, and ease. The implicit promise of this perverted paradigm, happiness, of course, peace of mind, contentment. This is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetuated on humankind, because stuff doesn't make one happy, because the quest for status is rooted in ego, and because security is an illusion. As a result, we suffer, and in turn, we inflict pain on others and upon the planet at large. Intellectually, we all know it's true. The key to our identity and ultimately to our happiness cannot be found in what we own. Our quest is not to accumulate, it's not to seek power, and it's not to remain safe. And I think that's so beautiful and so representative of our consuming lifestyle that as the years go on, as technology advances, we become more and more depersonalized. And we're seeing this evolve. As physicians, I see this evolve all the time. Every patient I'm discussing their healthcare with may feel, isolation, depression, anxiety, and different aspects that come from this culture of wanting more and more and more material things.
Mm-hmm.
I just think is really beautifully put. And I would love for you to share some of your story for those who don't know you yet, and for how you came to this abundance of knowledge and growth.
Sure. Well, thank you for the kind words and for reading that. I guess I would start by saying that, I'm a product of that mentality that drove me, seeking to achieve that traditional idea of the American dream. My entire life was premised upon, success, security, accumulating, consumer goods and power and everything that gets packed into that. And I played that out until I faced an existential and health crisis that kind of collided with one another to kind of bring me to my knees and force me to confront myself in a very profound way, and ultimately to change everything about how I was living. I grew up upper middle class in Washington, D.C. by two parents who loved me dearly and met all my needs and are still married. And education was a big priority in my household, and I went to a really nice prep school. And I struggled academically as a young person, and I kind of found my calling in the swimming pool when I was quite young. It was the one thing that I actually had some level of kind of natural acumen for. And I really invested in developing that skill, being the best swimmer that I could. And the better that I got, that spilled over into my academic life. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd gone from a kid who really struggled to learn to being one of the top students in my class and one of the best competitive swimmers in my region. So I was recruited to all these fancy schools. I got into all the Ivy Leagues and all that kind of stuff that you aspire to when you're that age, and ended up going to Stanford, where I competed on the best collegiate swimming team in the world. We had Olympic gold medalists and world record holders, and at this incredible academic institution. So my whole life was kind of set up for success. I was this golden child with all of this potential. And then, enter stage left, alcohol and partying. And that quickly began to take center stage in my life. And it was, kind of a slow burn. It started out as fun, but it wasn't long before it started to denigrate, kind of my value system and my priorities, to the point where I didn't really care about my swimming career anymore. I wasn't that interested in what was going on in the classroom. I just wanted to figure out where my next good time was going to go down. But I was able to kind of maintain that for a number of years. I graduated college. I went to law school. Somehow I graduated law school and ended up with a pretty nice job at a law firm in San Francisco, and then ultimately, another fancy law firm job in Los Angeles, and felt like, despite sort of, tabling my alcoholism for a moment, felt like I was making all the right decisions to be a good boy and a productive member of society.
Right. Like on paper, you were right on all the checks, all the boxes were checked, all your, T's were crossed, I's dotted, and
all of it, leasing the nice car, like the whole deal. And, I ended up getting sober at 31. I bottomed out in drugs and alcohol. And that was my first kind of, moment of reckoning where I started to look inward for the very first time in my life. Like I'd never asked myself, what do you want to do? Like, what makes you happy? Like those questions were just never part of my calculus growing up. It was just about, climbing that ladder and like doing the next, thing to get me to the place that everyone told me I was supposed to go. And, I started doing yoga. When I got sober, I started doing yoga, and I was very invested in 12-step, which is essentially a spiritual program. I began the process of rebuilding my life, but still had this blind spot in terms of, my professional career. I went back to the law firm and I doubled down on work because I really felt like I needed to prove to everybody, and I suppose to myself, that I could be, that person that I once was, that golden boy. And, what I wanted to do with myself really, still didn't enter the picture. And so by the time I was 39, I had achieved that goal. I was on the partnership track at a fancy firm and the nice car and all the stuff we were talking about a moment ago. But started to was becoming deeply depressed because I was living in a way that was dissonant with what I believed to be my true self. And during that period of time, had kind of transferred a lot of those addictive alcoholic tendencies onto work, became a workaholic, and didn't mind my health, my nutrition, my fitness, despite the fact that I'd been an athlete, in younger years, really just put that in the rear view and had become kind of a junk food addict, just eating fast food every day and Chinese takeout in the law firm and working ridiculous hours and, stressed out, anxious, and in my free time was essentially a couch potato. And when you're young, you can kind of get away with that stuff for a little while. But at 39, it started to catch up to me. And so all of these emotions and, these confusing emotions about what I was doing with my life were percolating to the surface at the same time that my poor health was starting to catch up to me. And these things kind of collided in a perfect storm one evening shortly before I turned 40, when I had this second, awakening or moment of reckoning, walking up my staircase to go to bed, when I had to pause because I was too winded to make it up the full flight of stairs without taking a break. And I had tightness in my chest. And really, it was a moment in which, I was very afraid about my health. And it kind of all came cascading down on me. Heart disease runs in my family. My grandfather had also been a champion swimmer, but died very young of heart disease. And my mother would always tell me, like, look, you got to be careful. My dad died young. It runs in the family. But I never paid that any heed. And it wasn't until that moment where that became, visceral and real. And because I had this previous kind of moment of reckoning where I had to get sober, and I ended up in a treatment facility for 100 days, and had some perspective on how much that had changed my life, I knew that I was being revisited by another, kind of special moment where the seas had parted and I had a glimpse of what my life could be, and was visited with some willingness to do something about it. And because of that, I had the wherewithal, the foresight, the awareness to be able to grab onto that moment and say, okay, here's another opportunity to make some changes. And that was really the beginning of, of the life that I'm now living today.
That is so amazing. And there's just so much enlightenment in what you just said. I mean, the truth is I don't know anyone listening that can't relate to this. I think sometimes we feel like we're in this rat race, and before you know it, it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and your life's just flying before your eyes, and time just passes so fast, and you don't feel like you've actually contributed enough to society, and you don't feel like you've, even if you do feel like you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's, you may not feel like you've really lived your life's purpose. I actually think that in medicine, I think one of the reasons why I'm such a huge fan of yours is ever since I read Finding Ultra is that, there are a lot of parallels. In medicine, you take your prerequisites very structured. You go to medical school, then you go to residency, and then you feel like, oh, I have to apply to fellowship, and then I have to do, you just feel like you have to do all these things. And there are people, I come from a family of teachers, but there are so many people out there in all different careers, in business and, and every different sort of avenue. But there's so many people that feel compelled to just live that my life is good on paper life. And I just think your book and your story really shows that living a life full of purpose and meaning and finding that is actually what's special.
Well, they're very ephemeral concepts. Like, what does that mean to live a life of meaning and purpose? And they seem like the purview they seem luxurious, right? To somebody who's just trying to get through the day or, get the next, career bump or whatever it is. And, to be kind of clear and drill it down to, a kind of tactile, relatable message. We think that our bank balances are, what defines us. They are our greatest, asset or liability. But in truth, time is our greatest asset, and we don't fully appreciate it. And I think that, it's really a crisis of consciousness as much as anything else. We're living our lives reactively and without mindfulness about what it is that we're doing. And we're not. It's really not our own fault. There's so much cultural momentum behind these forces that lead us into paths that, perhaps we don't even feel like we consciously chose for ourselves, because we haven't prioritized the inward journey of trying to connect with who we really are and what it is that we want to express and how that can contribute to the betterment of, culture and society at large. And I think that manifests itself in all of these epidemics that we're seeing currently, from depression to suicide to opioid addiction. And, look, what you deal with day in and day out, heart disease, is a manifestation of excess. We're eating too much, we're eating the wrong foods, we're living, we're working too much. All of these things coalesce to create these health conditions that are killing us unnecessarily at rates that are, historically unprecedented.
I mean, you're so right. And I think that another thing that you reflect a lot on and that I think is really valuable is that I myself, look at the way even I've never struggled with addiction, but with regards to alcohol or anything like that. But I think it's really relatable that things like this can happen to anyone, and that none of us are perfect and none of us are impermeable to any sort of outside forces or influences or things in life, because life can be so stressful. And I'm constantly working on a day-to-day basis to try to find, like you were saying, that purpose and that meaning. And it can be hard when you get used to, like you were saying, the day-to-day, trying to get your work done and trying to just get everything together by the end of the day. And I think one of the biggest themes that I've seen throughout your writing and your career that's been really inspiring to me is how much resilience you have, because resilience is, can be an overused word. It's one of my favorite words. So my niece is 7 years old. I'm very close with my family. I have two sisters, and my niece is 7, and she just last year was diagnosed with leukemia. And she has been a total fighter. She is really been strong, and it's this resilience that she has. Sometimes as adults, we lose this beautiful hope that things are going to get better, and then I look at my niece and she's playing with her rescue dog and building a Lego house. And these are adventures and happiness that she finds every day, even though she's a 7-year-old with a port catheter where she's getting chemo and spinal chemo and, all of these things that no 7-year-old should have to face. But she has this hopefulness that as adults, even as teenagers, we start to lose. And with all of your, you've demonstrated this unbelievable resilience. You fell, you picked yourself up, you fell, and you picked yourself up again. And so you changed not only your life, but thousands around the world through your inspiration. So what does resilience, mean to you? And how have you picked yourself up in those times that you were down, for all of us that are out there listening that may think, I can't do it?
Wow, that's a challenging question to answer. I mean, I think it begins with understanding that a couple things. I mean, it begins with understanding that we're all capable of so much more than we allow ourselves to believe. We have very limiting beliefs around our personal capability. And that's fueled in part by the fact that we don't challenge ourselves enough physically, emotionally. Like we get in our lane and we get safe and secure and we're sort of told and taught to just stick with what's working and not push the envelope in any particular direction, which I think makes us soft and then leads to not lethargy, but a sense that there's no reason to challenge ourselves outside of what's functionally working in our lives. And then I think at the same time, we also tend to believe that we are our thinking mind, and that there's a separation between mind and body and spirit, and we don't think of ourselves holistically. So most of us are living our lives up in our head. And when we go to work out, we hit the treadmill, and that's our body. But we don't think about tending to the whole. And when we create that division between mind and body and spirit and compartmentalize these things, I think that we're hamstringing ourselves and undercutting this sense of capability that I was talking about a moment ago. And then the third thing I think is that most people, like I said, we're living reactively. We're not propelled by some purpose that holds meaning outside of our own, selfish personal agenda for our career or our family or ourselves. And without that, you're reliant upon motivation, which is fleeting and not a sustainable source of fuel, as opposed to purpose and meaning, which really can get you through those difficult moments where you want to quit and you feel like you can't go forward. So when you ask me, how do you pick yourself up and move forward? It's because I felt like I was channeling, like I was amused to this greater purpose that I was seeking. So it wasn't that I was motivated to pick myself back up. It's that I felt like I had this deep knowing that I was on this mission of self-discovery, and I was fueled by that. So that gave me the sustainable fuel source to get through difficult times or dark times, because of this self-belief that this deep, deep knowing that only comes from doing a lot of internal work, that I was on the path that was meant for me.
Wow. That is so well said. The first part that you just mentioned actually is really relatable for me. So for everyone that doesn't know, you are plant-based, and I see patients in my preventive cardiology clinic that I help transition to plant-based nutrition. I'm very vocal about it. And I think the first part of what you said is fascinating, that you said, that sometimes we almost feel like we underscore how much we're capable of and how much we can do. I find that sometimes I meet a lot of patients that almost feel like they don't deserve health. They feel like they don't deserve this life of health or wellness, or they feel like it's not attainable for them, that they're looking at someone else that's a separate, it's impossible for them to be as healthy as Ritual, for them to be as healthy as, any of the other people they see out there, that's just not a life meant for them. And I think one of the biggest factors I tried to explain to patients who are making a lifestyle change is it can be their own version of you, their own healthy version of themselves. But everyone deserves health, and everyone deserves to work towards their optimal potential. And I think that a lot of times the reason why people don't is because they just don't get that encouragement and that support. Did you have someone in your life that was, besides Julie, I'm sure she's been the biggest part of all of this, but that kind of pushed you to tell you can do this, you can really make this change? Or did you just find it really on your own through all of your internal work?
Well, let me answer that question by first addressing something you said a moment ago about people feeling like they don't deserve to be healthy. And I think, with people like that, which is a lot of people, if not the majority of people, you as a doctor can prescribe to these people like, look, here's here's your protocol. Here's what you eat. Here's what you don't eat. Here's your exercise. You could give them all of these tools, and it's not going to work. They're not going to do it because fundamentally they're a victim of their own fixed mindset about what they deserve and what they're capable of. So if you don't treat the psychology of that person and the emotional well-being of that person, it doesn't matter how much practical solution you give them, which gets back to treating people holistically. And I think in my case, I had Julie, who was an amazing support system, 100%, and made these lifestyle transitions that I was trying to make 1,000% easier, because she always believed that I had this within me the whole time before I was able to see it myself. So, I was very lucky in that regard. Without that, I don't know whether I would have made these changes. So, I can't take full credit for that. But I am somebody who, once I make a decision to do something, I don't have trouble sticking to it. I think that like I can follow through. I don't waver. I don't have a motivation problem. I don't have a discipline problem, because those are skills that I learned early, through in the swimming pool. Like, wasn't the most talented athlete or swimmer, but I was a worker, and I knew that I could minimize, the talent deficit gap by outworking everyone else in the pool. And I became incredibly disciplined. Like, I had the discipline of a Navy SEAL when I was 16 years old. And those are skills and tools that still serve me. So when I need to, make a change in my life, which, granted, let's be clear, like I don't necessarily do willingly, like they're usually motivated by pain. But when I get to that pain point where the fear of change, is outweighed by the discomfort of whatever situation I find myself in, once I flick that switch and commit, then I'm in, But I think that's not everybody. Like, I can't presume, I'm not going to be somebody who's going to be like, look, just suck it up and do it. Like, because I know that doesn't work for a lot of people. So, I'm a big advocate of trying to create momentum. When people get a taste of positive change in their own life, then it creates this self-perpetuating machine. So it requires encouragement and accountability, both positive and negative accountability in those early stages. And you have to give permission to people to fail and not beat themselves up. Like, that this is, the long run is what we're interested in here.
I love that so much. It is just such fantastic advice. The way I look at the way doctors are, conditioned and taught to teach patients what they should be doing. First of all, many physicians don't even practice their own self-care and health appropriately. And then we're barely taught about how to speak to patients and how to evaluate the psychology behind behavior change. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, because behavior change is not just, hey, eat, like you said, eat this, exercise, and come back and see me in 6 months. I find that the patients so I've had 100 approximately patients go plant-based since I started my program last April. And I've seen patients completely reverse their diabetes, their hypertension, decrease their atrial fibrillation, multiple disease processes just gone. I have a patient that lost 220 pounds. And the patients I find that really have had success are ones that have really started to believe in themselves and also believe in the fact that they will find happiness in the journey along the way. And it's not just about hitting the target of a certain weight loss goal. It's just, oh, wow, they start to reap the positive benefits of healthful living and start to feel more energy, sleeping better. And I feel like I agree with you that you have to be there for people to allow them to fall. I just had a new patient today that I saw in the office that I told him, if he says he's all in wanting to start plant-based nutrition. And I said, it's completely fine if you slip or, it's totally fine. It's part of the process. And you can, of course, email me any questions or anything. And he just was so surprised. And I said, this is not black and white. Life is gray. And, you need to, I think that a big part of health is us recognizing what our own barriers are to change and our patients' barriers to change. And I think that you really make a good point about that. For you to keep as disciplined as you are. And you've been disciplined your whole life. I mean, you're kind of downplaying how much of a big deal you are in swimming. But you are huge deal. And you were recruited everywhere and you become an incredible athlete in your adult life as well. And so one question I have for you, which I know probably everyone listening can struggle with. So with regards to behavior change when it comes to exercise, so you being so disciplined, and even if looking back at when you first started working out again, how do you handle it when you just want to sleep in? How do you keep yourself going those days you just, I don't feel like doing it? How do you keep that fire burning and that motivation to do as much as you're doing?
A couple things. I mean, first of all, setting a goal that's meaningful to you is important. And that can help to override that impulse to, be lazy and sleep in. There's a deadline, like, in my context, it would be like a race on the calendar. Time is ticking. And, when you're busy doing a lot of things, every workout counts. And, if I want to perform to my capabilities, I can't afford to sleep in. That's, a decision that I made when I set that goal for myself and created the intention around it. So whether your goal is weight loss or fitness or anything for that matter, I think setting a goal that's specific and time bound and then scheduling back from that to create a program that has intermittent stepping stone goals along the way can be very helpful in keeping you actively engaged in the daily grind, because the romance of the big goal quickly wears off when the alarm clock goes off. So I think it's important, but you need that like kind of push. The second thing is disassociating your thinking mind from your higher self. You have to become an observer of your thoughts, and once you can kind of understand that whatever's looping in your head is not necessarily you, because you can observe yourself doing that. Like, so who's doing the observing? And the more you can step into being that observer, the more you're engaged in your higher consciousness. And the more you learn that when your mind is sending you these signals like sleep in or turn the alarm clock off, that you actually have a choice as to whether engage that as to whether you're going to engage that chatter or ignore it. And I think most people, it goes back to being mindful and present in your life. If you're not being mindful, you're being reactive, and you're just going to react to that impulse and hit the snooze button. But if you can have the awareness, the presence of mind to say, oh, that's interesting, my mind is doing that thing again because my body wants to sleep in, but I don't have to make that choice. And a trick that I use and a mantra that I kind of repeat is mood follows action, right? We have this tendency to think, well, I'll do that when I feel like it, or when I feel better, or when I feel more rested, then I'll go do that thing. And the truth is that day generally never comes. So if you can train yourself to take the action irrespective of how you feel about it or what you think about it, you will find that your mood will follow suit. And it's that adage of, I never get back from a run and wish that I slept in or wish that I hadn't done it. Like, you always feel better after you do it. Your mood reacts to your actions, not the other way around. But we walk around believing that, our mood will shift and then we take the action. And I think we have it backwards that way. So I think that's super important as well. And I think creating or cultivating community around whatever goal it is that you have is also super important. You're less likely to hit the snooze button if you're supposed to meet your buddy at the gym at 5:30 and he or she is going to be there waiting for you. That's an extra impetus to get up out of bed and get it done.
Mood follows action is my favorite thing I've heard in 2019 so far. That is so perfect, because as you were saying this, I'm thinking in my head, I am so guilty of this. So guilty of this. I'll be coming home from a day of work when I was on cath for a month and I'm exhausted and I'm like, I'll work out when I get a chance, when I'm, well rested. I mean, I'm in cardiology fellowship. I'm never well rested. So it's so true. And then every day that I force myself to work out, I'm never regretting it. That is so well put.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, I can't let this interview go by without mentioning two things. First of all, it's absolutely insane that in medical school, they're not teaching nutrition and they're not teaching the psychology of how to connect emotionally with your patients. Like, it makes no sense to me. It's completely antiquated.
Right.
Perhaps more antiquated is this whole residency, system that has you guys working ridiculous shifts to exhaustion just because that's the way the generation that preceded you did it. It
Exactly.
makes no sense when people's lives hang in the balance.
I know. So the thing is, actually, there's a lot of discussion lately about physician wellness, physician burnout. When I was a resident, I worked more than I work as a cardiology fellow, but for 3 years, I worked a ton. And my program was very, very resident friendly and and same with my cardiology fellowship program. But I mean, in surgery and certain subspecialties, it's even more brutal. And training there's a lot that's coming out, with suicides of physicians. I mean, physicians, I believe, have the highest suicide rate of any profession. You feel like you are staring down this rabbit hole of years and years and years of training, and there's no way to get out. So physician wellness is huge, and there's a lot to be discussed about it. But recently there was actually research. It was this study called iCompare, and they looked at physicians that work with duty hour restriction and physicians that didn't. And they found that there was actually no change in patient outcomes. So they were saying that essentially the point of the study was, well, you can work 30 hours straight. I don't know if anywhere put into that is how miserable is the resident that's working all these hours. But I mean, the fact, so I address on this podcast a lot about the nutrition issue because it's very, very, very avoided in medical training just because it's not seen as the most important thing. And a lot of times people say to me, why are you as a physician so obsessed with physicians getting trained in nutrition when there's registered dietitians out there? And the reason why I find it so important is I find it, as a physician, it's completely unethical for me to be constantly just managing chronic disease, walking around the cardiac ICU and just managing chronic disease that I know can be helped with lifestyle modification without that being a part of the conversation. So many patients, I say, I bring up lifestyle modification, plant-based nutrition, and they're shocked that they didn't even know it was an option. And I think that it should be a part of the education. I think that it's increasing and it's becoming more and more of a popular topic. It's still not there. It still hasn't made its way into our training or our residency training or anything like that, and our board exams as much as it should. So yeah, it's an interesting field, but there's a lot of, I think the physicians of my generation are really trying to incorporate more of this holistic approach to medicine because I think that there's just more information out there. When I went vegan when I was in my early 20s, like right when I graduated college, and when I started to really follow you and read your books and everything, I mean, you were a huge source of my education. So you've actually been a huge influence in my life for going plant-based. And one thing I wanted to ask you, of course, being that this is a plant-based focused podcast, is if you could explain for everyone that hasn't read your book yet, how did this change from being an omnivore and also eating, processed foods to going full plant-powered? How did that really change your life?
I mean, it's changed my life in every imaginable way. I mean, to be honest with you, like I just, I had that crisis on the staircase and I really needed to make some changes. And, this is before forks over knives and engine 2 and like all of that stuff. And I did a 7-day juice fast, which was really motivated more out of this need to do something hard. So I felt like I need to reboot my operating system and wipe the slate clean. And that seems like something really difficult to do. And it was very effective in that regard. And I felt great at the end of that period, and then thought, all right, well, now I need to find a way to eat, in a way that's going to allow me to feel this good all the time. And that was a very inelegant process of trial and error over 6 months until, I finally went completely plant-based and started very quickly having great results. And I've just been building on that ever since. And, it was really, the point I'm trying to make is that the emphasis was really just to lose, my gut and feel better so I could enjoy my kids at their energy level. I didn't have any goal beyond that. But what I've gotten in return is an entirely new life that really began with making this change in every imaginable way. I've reinvented my professional career. I've, developed this audience where I can be of service to other people in their health and fitness and spiritual and emotional journeys. And, it's been a constant evolution. And, one thing that I see, that I feel strongly about, that I see in the health and wellness community or in the sort of diet trenches, whether it be plant-based or otherwise, is people get very tribal about their diet choices. And then there's a lot of defensiveness that goes up around that as people become siloed in their perspective. And my observation on that is that it ultimately ends up arresting the evolution that awaits. So I went plant-based so that I could, broaden the aperture on my life, have increased energy so I could go out and be the best version of myself. And that meant addressing a lot of other things in my life that I needed to look at. And the podcast is really a manifestation of that growth curve for me, trying to, improve in all areas of my life, professionally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as a parent, as a husband, all of those things. So plant-based nutrition cleaned the plate, allowed my physical vessel to heal itself and, express itself athletically in these endeavors that I've done, which have gotten, which have sort of created attention, because people pay attention when you go out and you do some crazy athletic thing and achieve it. And then you have a microphone and a platform to then use for the betterment of myself and other people. So this has made me, very aware of all of the things that I talk about in the foreword of the book, that yes, we're in a healthcare crisis. We're fatter than ever. Obesity rates, childhood obesity rates are through the roof. Diabetes rates are insane. Heart disease, America's #1 killer. 1 out of every 3 people will die of heart disease. These are crazy numbers, but ultimately, again, we're having a spiritual crisis. People are living their lives reactively, to repeat that theme, and we're disengaged from what life can and should be. And adopting a plant-based diet was the first step. It was like getting to first base on this journey that I've been on, that has now made me much more attuned and compassionate in terms of how we treat our planet at large, the impact of not just our food choices, but all our consumer choices have on environmental well-being, for future generations. It's made me a more compassionate individual. Like, I didn't get into it because I love the animals, but now that issue has become very important to me. And I never thought that would happen. And that's just one example of many ways in which my consciousness has been altered and my life path has been, corrected to kind of blaze this way forward, being as, expressed as I possibly can and the best version of who I possibly can be.
I love that. I think that's so well said, especially because I can completely relate to the same kind of transition, going plant-based for health first and then for developing the ethical passion afterwards. The same thing happened to me. I just started learning more and more about plant-based nutrition, and then I got really interested in the ethical aspect of it. And I actually have seen this happen over the last year with my patients. People go plant-based just for hypertension, for CAD, and then by their follow-up visit, they're telling me they're no longer wearing leather, and they watched a documentary on factory farming, and it's unbelievable. It's all of a sudden, the veil is over their eyes and it's removed, and they can see this whole world and how much going plant-based or even more plant-forward can contribute to a compassionate life for us and the environment and future generations. It really is a journey.
Yeah. I mean, and once your eyes get opened, then you can't look at things in the same way. It's really like, taking the blue pill in the red pill. I never remember which pill it is.
Yeah, me neither. Well, I also cannot let this podcast pass without recognizing how just insanely athletic you are and the athletic challenges that you've competed in, just to name a few. for anyone out there that's not familiar with how much Rich has done from an athletic standpoint, it's like out of this world. So you've done the Epic 5 challenge. It was an Odyssey. That was 5 Ironman distance triathlons on 5 islands of Hawaii. You did it under a week. Your top finisher at the Ultraman World Championships in Hawaii. This is a 3-day, 320-mile double Ironman distance triathlon that circumnavigated the Big Island. And it was just unbelievable, the amount that you've accomplished. And I'm sure you get asked this, and I get asked this quite frequently, but I would love to hear from you, someone who is so athletic and so optimal with your performance. People who ask you about not getting protein from animal products, and how are you as an athlete able to get enough nutrition? Of course, I promise you, I know the answer to this, but I would love for people to hear from you, this accomplished athlete, how being plant-powered changes your athleticism, your recovery, and all of these things that I know so much from the science they do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's address the elephant in the room first, the protein question. People are always the most interested in. It's the myth that just won't die, I think.
Especially for you. I mean, Rich, you're doing these ultra long races. I mean, miles, days. I mean, if you can do it powered by plants, then the Joe Schmo can go to the gym and work out for 45 minutes and lift weights on plants.
So we live in this culture, which for some reason has propagated this myth that we need tremendous amounts of protein in order to just live, let alone compete as an athlete. If you don't drink a protein shake within moments of waking up in the morning, you're not going to be able to breathe air into your lungs. And very powerful, heavily invested food companies that are propagating this. If you go to the grocery store, you'll notice that almost every food item will be emblazoned in large block, big font block letters, how much protein is in everything. And the idea is that more is better. We need a lot of protein if you want to be strong and healthy and vital. And it's just simply untrue. Truth, as you know, we need about 10% of our calories to come from protein. Which isn't very much. If you just mindlessly graze on plants all day long, miraculously, it ends up being around 10%. It's almost as if nature and evolution has rigged it this way. But when we're talking about protein, what we're really talking about, as you know, is amino acids, the building blocks of protein. Of all of the amino acids in nature, our body is able to actually synthesize them itself, with the exception of 9. The so-called essential amino acids that we need to get from our food. And it turns out that these 9 essential amino acids are profligate in the plant kingdom. In fact, that's where the animals get them that we eat. So when we're eating animals, we're really just eating the middleman. And eating plant-based is just getting close to the source, going right to the source of where these amino acids are coming from. So that's point one. This whole protein myth is nonsense, and there's no evidence that I'm aware of that eating protein in excess of that daily recommended allowance, which, by the way, the World Health Organization estimates at being much lower, somewhere around 3%, not 10%. But anyway, there's no evidence that eating amounts in excess of that recommended daily amount is going to make you stronger or faster or repair your muscles more expeditiously. You just meet your need and you're fine. And in my case, I've been doing this now. I'm 52. I've been doing it since I was 40, 12 years.
You look like you're 52. You literally look like you're 25.
I don't know about that. The gray hair is coming in pretty quick.
But I think that the plants are definitely working. But yeah, for your athleticism, how do you think it's helped with the sports you do? I mean, the amount that you exercise, it's so impressive to me. I've ran 2 marathons in my life, and I cannot even imagine. My sister's done the Ironman, but none of it even compares to what you have done. It's just outstanding, and plant powered is just so impressive.
Well, I think that, I wouldn't go so far as to say that eating a plant-based diet is inherently going to make you a better athlete. But I think the kernel of truth in that is that you're eating a diet that's very nutrient dense compared to the diet that most people are eating, which is very calorically dense, but very nutrient poor. You're eating a very high concentration of phytonutrients and micronutrients All the minerals and vitamins are compacted into these, nutritious plant foods that you're eating. So you're meeting your nutritional needs without excess calories, for one. The second thing is a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet tends to be more, it tends to be antioxidant rich as well as more anti-inflammatory than the typical American diet. And the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant component of this is super important because as an athlete, you're going out and you're beating up your body every day, whether you're a triathlete or a weightlifter or a CrossFitter or whatever it is that you do. You go to the gym or you hit the trail or the treadmill and you move your muscles, and that breaks those muscles down. And those muscles then need to repair themselves. When they're broken down, this oxidative stress that's a result of exercise then summons your immune system to respond. And that response generally comes in the form of inflammation, as you know. And some inflammation is good. You want your immune system to respond to these damages and repair them. But what happens with most people is they end up chronically inflamed. They're eating foods that are promoting this inflammation, not expeditiously repairing the tissues and the muscle fibers. And you're in a state in which the body is perpetually in crisis. The more quickly you can repair your body as a result of exercise-induced stress, then the more quickly you will get stronger. In other words, the recovery period in between your workouts is what's important. And when you're eating a plant-based diet, you're really expediting that recovery process. You're allowing your body to repair itself as quickly as it possibly can with the foods that serve it best. So what that means is, again, it doesn't make you, an overnight better athlete, but when you can recover more quickly, that means that you can train harder, you can train more regularly, you're less likely to get injured or overtrain or get sick and run down as a result of your training. And so over time, this translates into performance gains. So you're able to make more rapid strides and improvements in a shorter period of time, which of course ultimately does make you a better athlete.
That makes so much sense. And I think that it was really well said. I love that you really got into the science with it too. It's very, very, I think in the athletic community, although it's growing because of people like you, I think it is still underrated. I think the most common population of people that ask me, well, like I can't be plant-based are men of my age because they're worried about this. They go to the gym for an hour, they're just doing some basic stuff at the gym and they're worried that they're not going to get enough protein. And I think you really, people like you are actually changing the conversation about what it means to be healthful and how to use nutrition to actually help improve your fitness and improve your health overall. Because you're right, the inflammation factor is huge. And I think that it's becoming more and more popular in the athletic space, but still has a little bit of a ways to go. Our nation's protein obsession is quite unbelievable, but I think that slowly with all the data coming out with plant protein versus animal protein, I hope it starts to change.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's happening right now. I mean, I think, when you're an athlete, especially an elite athlete, and somebody says, go plant-based, it's I want to appreciate the fact that that's, scary for a lot of people.
Right.
Especially if you're a professional athlete, like this is how you make a living. And, so I understand why there's some trepidation, but, look, I don't know if any professional athletes are listening to this. Most of us are just, going about our day and hitting the gym a couple times a week. So try it. I guarantee you're not going to see any reduction in muscle mass or anything of the kind. And the kind of joke that I always like to tell, you've probably told it on your podcast before, is, I don't know of any doctors in Western medicine that are treating patients for a protein deficiency.
Exactly.
We conjured up this bizarre condition that actually doesn't exist.
So true.
Unless you're starved, and you get Korsaker's disease, the protruding bellies in the children, it's because they're starved. You feed them rice and beans and it goes away.
No, it's so true. There is, I always say this, I say, because so much of cardiovascular disease, the reason why I love cardiology as a training and specialty, because so much of it is preventable and treatable with lifestyle modification. And so I always say that, when I'm walking through the hospital and doing consults, I've never met a vegan patient with a protein deficiency, but I see plenty of protein excess on a day-to-day basis. People that are eating too much bacon, too much, steak, chicken, and processed foods, even non-animal product processed foods, chips, etc. So definitely is an epidemic, but I think people like you are really starting to change that conversation. The last question I really wanted to ask you is, you've had this, well, first I want to commend you actually for how brave it is that you made this career change. I think it's so much almost easier in life to just kind of go with the flow, stay at a job you hate, keep doing what's comfortable, like you said, and to just kind of stick and stay on a level playing field and just not feel that fulfillment in life. And it's so brave of you to you've been, you're trained from all these fantastic institutions and you went to law school, you practice law at all these firms and you've done so much, and then you made this huge career change, and it takes so much balls and so much guts to do that. And I just want to commend you for that because it's really inspirational. There's a lot of people I'm sure listening that don't like their job every day and that aren't feeling like they're able to make that kind of change. So the thing I wanted to ask you is, what would you recommend for someone that is looking to make a big life change, whether it's a diet life change or whether it's a career life change, something as brave as you did, and kind of, how can you do it and what's the best way to move forward?
I think that, first of all, you don't have to quit your job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want people to be under the impression that, well, in order to make changes in your life, you have to completely, upend your entire life. I think that the best change that you can make is the one that you'll actually stick with. It's like, what's the best exercise? It's like the one you'll actually do. And, I think that, I would preface my response by saying, these changes are well within your grasp. This is not, something that is reserved for, the most disciplined among us. Like these changes are really easy. And, I think that anytime you make a change in your life, whether it's a lifestyle habit or a diet thing or something like that, there's a little discomfort, So, and I think the first point I would make is like, it's okay. It's okay to be just uncomfortable for a little bit. It's not going to kill you. And if you want to, manifest the changes in your life to be the person that you can be, you have to weather a little discomfort. So if you're eating McDonald's all the time or used to a certain, lifestyle habit that's not serving you, to change that is going to be, it's not going to be, everybody wants to hack, do it overnight, make it painless and easy. Well, the truth is, it's not. If it was, everyone would do it. It is uncomfortable. So rather than trying to avoid that or deny it, just embrace it. It's fine. And start slow. Make one change at a time, master it, move on to the next. Maybe ditch the dairy, get rid of the milk in your kitchen and buy almond milk or coconut milk or soy milk or rice milk or any of the 8,000 now plant milks that you can find at most grocery stores. And, start using that. Put that in your morning coffee or in your cereal or however you enjoy it. And that might feel weird for a little bit. You might miss drinking dairy, but I guarantee you, if you stick with it for 2 weeks, you'll acclimatize to it and it'll be fine. And you won't really have to think about it again. And then move on to the next thing. Master these small little things, celebrate the victories, and build upon it. But don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Everybody, I think that, you see these diets, it's like, oh, you get a cheat day, 1 day a week. All of these are catering to people's basest desires to, maintain this level of ease and comfort. And the truth is, if you want to make a change, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. But then once you master it, then it becomes second nature. It's not uncomfortable anymore. Like, this too shall pass, but just, welcome it into your life rather than persistently trying to avoid it.
That is so well said. You are so right, especially because I think back, I'm sure I already know the answer to your question, but does any part of you miss dairy? I can't even think a part of me that would want to eat meat or dairy right now. It's like it's a distant memory.
Well, I think people think that, someone like yourself or me, like we're a martyr and we walk around with just insane cravings all the time and we're suffering, but we're doing it because, we're in for the, we're doing it for the greater good or some, nonsense like that. And the truth is like, it must be so hard. How do you do it when you travel and when you're training? You must be in the kitchen all the time. Like, I don't really think about it anymore. It really doesn't occupy. It's not mentally taxing to me. And I don't even really, they're like, oh, you must have to spend all this time when you're going out of town to figure out where you get. I don't. I just, I trust myself that it's going to work out. I've traveled all over the world. It's never been a problem. And you just get used to these kinds of foods. And I don't crave these foods that I used to not be able to go one day without eating. And it's because you have to put time and distance between yourself and those habits that are holding you hostage in order to become truly free.
I love that so much. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head there because it really does just change your entire perception of food and nutrition. And I have to give you so much credit for your meal planner because I really think it can help people. Your Plantpower meal planner can help people to transition to plant-based nutrition in an easy to follow, easy way.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, we're really proud of this product that we've created. It's essentially, a super simple, easy to use digital platform. It's incredibly cost-effective and affordable. It's just like $1.90 a week. And it gives you access to thousands of plant-based recipes, whole food plant-based recipes. And when you sign up, you have to enter all this data about your life and your preferences, how many people you cook for, what foods do you like or not like, what are you allergic to, all these inputs. And then you get delivered to you all of these recipes that meet that criteria. And it creates automatic grocery lists so that you can go to the store and know exactly what you need to get. And it integrates with grocery delivery in most cities. So you can actually just, say, I want to eat this, and then the groceries to make those foods to show up at your door. And, basically we created it to answer a very simple question, which is to take all the mystery and the difficulty out of eating healthy, delicious food and make it as simple as possible for people so that there's no more excuses. And I think we've succeeded in that, and also creating it in a way that's very democratic and, accessible to pretty much everybody. So yeah, if you're struggling or you feel like, I just stink in the kitchen and I hate cookbooks and, I don't know what to get by when I go to the grocery store, where to get this stuff, just check it out. And I think, this may very well answer all of the questions that you have. And the remaining questions that you do have, we have this very skilled team of health coaches that are available, this amazing customer service team that will answer all of your questions, no matter how silly or complicated.
No, and I agree. And I think that what's important that I try to recognize, and I'm sure you're empathetic for this as well, is that, we've been vegan for so long that it's easy to forget what it was like to transition. And so, when someone says to me like, oh my God, how do you eat plant-based? A part of me, I hate to say it, a part of me wants to laugh because I'm like, haven't you eaten a carrot or an apple? It's not coming from outer space. It's just fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. But I do have so much empathy for someone that the mystery is the perfect way to put it that you said. It takes the mystery out of it. That's why I actually like your meal planner, because it demystifies this whole transition that eating plant-based is going to be just salads and it's going to be boring. It gives you a really easy way to make some lifestyle changes with regards to your diet to make them easy and convenient so it doesn't feel like extra work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. And I can't thank you enough for how much you've contributed to this plant-based movement and how I have to tell you how much of an inspiration you've been for me and my entire family. Everyone just loves you. We have your cookbook and we've all read your book, and it's just, you really are just a very special human. And I think the world is a better place because your voice is being heard by everyone everywhere. So where can everyone listening right now that doesn't already follow everything you do like I do, where can they find you?
So first of all, I appreciate that. Thank you. I feel like I just sit at my house and talk into a microphone. And you're the one who's actually, on the front lines, like dealing with people, on a case by case basis. So please keep doing it.
You do a lot more than that. You do a lot for us.
But I'm easy to find. richroll.com is the website where you can find all my stuff. The Rich Roll podcast, which you can find on my website or wherever you listen to podcasts. We also film them and they're on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, which you can find through my website. And I'm just at Rich Roll on all the social media platforms. And the meal planner you can find at meals.richroll.com.
And Rich's book that I've already mentioned 100 times, if you haven't read it, you can get it. I actually listened to it on Audible first time I read it. And you can buy it on Amazon, anywhere you buy books. It's called Finding Ultra. But the first time I read it, and I highlighted it, I have the hard copy. The second time I quote unquote read it, I listened to you on Audible and you do the narration and it's awesome.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Well, yeah, the foreword that you read, I rewrote it. I rewrote the book last year. The book came out in 2012.
Right.
And then last year I revised it. It didn't actually have that foreword in the original version of it.
Yes. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it. It's super nice to talk to you.